Right.
Yep, we're ready to go.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Living in Hackney. This is a virtual meeting, as all meetings of the council are, due to the COVID outbreak. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed now, so members of the public can watch this meeting live. Can you please keep your microphones on mute unless you've been called to speak? This prevents audio feedback. If you'd like to speak, raise your hand to get my attention. The chat function mustn't be used to have conversations with other participants or for personal information. This is a formal meeting. The press may be in attendance, but I'm not sure whether they are or not today, or watching it online. Apologies for absence. I've got apologies, Councillor Mahoney, for being late. I don't have any other apologies. Urgent items, there's no urgent items. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest on any of the items on this agenda? No.
Yes, there is. I'm a leaseholder with London Borough of Hackney.
Yep, I'm a leaseholder with London Borough of Hackney as well. And I know Councillor Mahoney is as well. I'll declare on his behalf because he's not here at the moment, but when he joins, it's safe him when he joins. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the item 4, which is an update from Thames Water on the burst water main that happened in N4 last year. There is a supplementary agenda and a presentation from Thames Water. Thames Water got the maximum of 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patrick. Hi. To remind everybody, Steve Spence from the operations.
No, I've got.
Can you hear me okay?
So the item we're discussing is the Commission asked Thames Water and Ofwat to return to update us on the progress of repair works, status of residents returning to their homes, homeowners, private tenants, council tenants, registered social landlords and leaseholders, an outline of their investment plans, timescales and improvements they expect to achieve, and Ofwat are here as a regulator to tell us about the progress of Thames Water and the accessibility of the information locally and the investments and improvements. Guests inspected for this item, I'd like to welcome to the meeting from Thames Water, Steve Spencer and Tim Mahone, and from Ofwat, Carl Feasey. Okay, is Steve or Tim doing the presentation?
Yes, it's myself. Hi.
Can anyone hear me?
I can.
Right. That's good.
Can you hear me? I just want to check.
Steve?
Yeah, can you hear
Tim?
me? Yes, you're nodding. Great. Okay, thank you.
Would you like to start?
Yeah, we will. Thank you. So thank you.
Here?
Yes, we are.
Yep.
I can't hear anybody.
Yes, we're here. I will carry on. Yeah. So thank you for inviting us back to the scrutiny committee. What I'd like to do is, with myself, I will, if we can flick on to the next slide, I'll just give you a little bit of what we will run through. As we've mentioned,
I can't hear anything. Can anybody hear anything?
Yes, I can hear.
Right.
Yeah, I can hear.
Is the presentation started? Because I can't hear a thing. I can't.
We can hear. Maybe the network is from your end, Chair.
If you can't hear anything, Tracy, would you give her a call, and ask her to log out and back in again?
I will do.
That's it. Thank you. I can hear now.
Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. So what we'll do, Tracy, if we can move on to the next slide, I'll just give a little bit of a introduction of what we will cover. What I will do, I will cover the elements around the Queen's Drive, the burst update, what's happened since the burst, both in terms of residents and work we've been doing with Hackney. And then Tim McMahon, who's joined me, who's our Head of Asset Management, will very much talk about the planned investment we've in Hackney in the next 5-year period, and in particular, a particularly large project that we've got that we are due to start quite shortly. So if you're happy to move on to the next slide, just a summary of where we are. So in total, there are a lot more properties, over 170 properties that were impacted by the burst. But we're in a place where 80 of those needed to vacate either immediately after the event or at a later point while we undertook the repairs. Of the 83, 52 families and residents are back in their properties, and that includes all council tenant properties. And we believe there are 19 that remain in alternative accommodation. Of that, they're kind of split between two groups. One in which came through our own insurers, on which we undertook the work, and a group of residents that decided to go through their own insurers or use their own contractors. Of that 19, there are currently 4. I can say for a slight update this week, we're now to 3. Which we're managing in terms of return to their properties. We've got 3 that we're doing, and we're doing the work ourselves through our contractors aspect. Of that 3, we've got 1 resident which is visiting the property at the weekend to go through snagging and just to make sure that everything's okay. And another one of those properties will be completed next week, which the snagging again will take place and go through the process of handover. And then the third one, there is a few more complications there in the fact that the resident there's some discussions around the extent of the remedial works that have been undertaken and discussions with our insurers and the specialists. So a little more work to do there. But we're hoping all by that 1 customer of the ones that we're managing, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, everybody will be back in their properties. Now, the one thing to remember is that of those that have returned, and for those customers, we still have presence, we still have people available, and obviously if there's any snags that come up when people are moving back in, then of course we will pick them up and we will talk to those residents and families. Of the 15 that were their own insurers and contractors, less easy for us to give you a definitive update, particularly those that were their own insurers, because we tend to find that now is at the point where the solicitors or the insurance solicitors are dealing with the recovery of the costs. And therefore, it tends to be more on a kind of with the solicitor basis, which is a little bit more difficult to get the exact position, unless the residents are happy to share that with us. And some of them are, and some of them do inform us of where they are and whether we can help in any way. We've got 12 families that decided to move away from Queen's Drive after the incident. Those 12 families are in 4 properties. Of those properties, 2 have been refurbished and are back with the landlords for reoccupation, and 2 at the moment, the landlords have decided to do the repairs themselves, and we're not 100% sure exactly where they are. But again, we keep in contact with them, and we're always there to help if need be. One of the things that's slightly different for us, and you may ask why. Obviously, we're now at the point where a lot of our work is complete with the residents, is that we took the decision through COVID, once we'd done a review and safe ways of working with our contractors, we continued to do the refurbishment work through COVID and the lockdown. We didn't want people to be unnecessarily away from the properties any longer than they needed to be, so we took that decision to continue with the refurbishments. And for myself, and you remember seeing me in January, I very much keep an overview of everything that's going on, every property, every resident, and I get regular updates through from the team. And if any decisions need to be made, I step in and help wherever possible. And that will not stop, as we promised, until everybody's back in and we've dealt with all the snagging. So that's it from a resident's perspective. If we just move on, one slide. Obviously, upon what happened at Queen's Drive, and obviously, as we remember, it was our most significant trunk mains burst we've had for a long time. We've changed the way in which we manage incidents. We were planning on this, but we've accelerated it, and we've done a few things. The first thing is we've moved to an incident management structure now, which reflects the structure that what we call the blue responders and local authorities use. And and what we call the multi-agency gold incident command. Our whole structure's been now reconfigured around that and how we manage incidents. Clearly then, that allows us to have clear chains of command, which reflect exactly the structures, particularly that Hackney and other local boroughs and councils have as well. So there's much more kind of direct coordination during incidents. And our key thing there is about communicating quickly when things happen. And you may have picked up that we had a significant leak on a main, not a large trunk main, but another main in the area recently in August. And again, we made contact with the council very quickly. We got updates and customer reps on the ground very quickly to just I think more to reassure people, because it wasn't a major issue, but clearly with water running down the road, we could understand the concerns that people may have. So we made sure we got people there. So we've changed that structure, very different kind of response team that we've got. We've also now developed a team of emergency planners, and their whole job in life is to purely work with the emergency planning departments of boroughs and councils to make sure we're far more coordinated, as we heard, for things like the rest centres that were set up, etc., and bottled water. And we've very much formed a key link with the emergency planning team into Hackney. And on top of that, we've also recruited staff dedicated to aftercare. So when an incident happens, we don't just repair and leave. We've now got a dedicated team within my part of the business, which is all about making sure that we stay with customers right the way through to the point where they're back in the property and everything has been resolved. And then the final thing is that we've expanded our business resilience team as well to work with the LRFs, and particularly Hackney LRF. We started that process as a bit of it was the first out of the blocks for us, and one that we've developed quite extensively over the last 12 months. It's now rolling into other boroughs of London. If you go to the next slide, Tracy, just some things that we've done. So we invited, again, to build that relationship with the council and the borough. You know, we've invited Hackney came to our operations room and learn about how we now manage incidents, and we've kept that regular contact. We simulated an event using the new arrangements, similar to Queen's Drive back in August. Obviously, COVID, not quite as exactly how you would like to do it, so it did have an impact. But we've agreed that we'll have a future simulation as well. Maybe once the pandemic pressure eases and we can do a little bit more kind of face-to-face and deploy some of our people into your offices, etc. And we're keen to do an exercise on that basis. And again, we've been liaising with attending the LRF meetings to make sure that we're very clear about the asset base we've got in Hackney, where the risks are, our contingency plans, and how we could work together in the future if hopefully we never do, but if a trunk main burst, we have a significant burst again in the future. What I will now do, just gives you a quick flavour, it's a quick fly through. What I'll now do is I'll hand over to Tim McMahon, and what Tim will talk about very much is our investment plans for the next few years and what we've also got planned, particularly in Hackney, in the near future.
Thank you, Steve. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Brilliant, good stuff, thank you. So Tracy, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, please. So before I take you through sort of a bit of a background around Hackney and our plans, I just want to sort of take it up a notch and take you through our plans for the next 5 years in Thames Water, because the water industry has a very challenging plan. It's a plan that we've set. It is a stretching plan, and it's a stretching plan because we want to get better for our customers. So we have to reduce leakage by 20% in the next 5 years, and we have to reduce our custom supply interruptions. So that's when people's water is off supply, by 70% over the next 5 years, and we're doing that whilst reducing customer bills by £23 over the next 5 years. So we are having to push our money further and be more efficient and effective in spending our monies to achieve those very challenging targets. How are we doing that? Lots and lots of activity, but very much around data and insight. So an intelligent operation of our existing assets. We're doing a lot around how do we use our data to effectively understand where our problems are before they occur, looking at our worst performing pipes and taking the data we've learned over the last year, working with IBM to make our investment go further, looking at pressure waves. So pressure is a major issue that causes burst pipes, and how do we prevent the shocks on the network and calming that asset base down, and the continuation with our smart meter program. So over the last 5 years, we've had the second biggest smart meter program in the world for water, and that's something we're continuing to do. And a smart meter is a meter that reads water going into someone's property for us to understand usage, help educate customers to reduce usage, but also helps us understand where leakage is, because 30% of leakage is on the customer side pipe work. So this gives you a bit of a flavour of sort of the challenges we've got and what we're doing around our plans for the next 5 years. If you move to the next slide, please, Tracy. So in particular, what are we doing around the Hackney area? So we have two larger risks in the Hackney area, and that's Seven Sisters and the Queen's Drive road locations. And we are actually in the midst of commencing work at those sites. So on the 21st of October, sorry, the 19th of October, we are actually commencing at Seven Sisters. So we've been talking to customers in this area over the last week, but very much what we call relining those pipes. That's when we turn the pipes off and put new pipe in it to make it more resilient. So there's no water in the pipes, there's no risk of it bursting when we're doing those works, but we make a big hole in the pipe and put water, put a new pipe in it, whilst making sure the customers around it are supplied with adequate water. So that's important because what we've identified through the investigations after the Queen's Drive burst, when we have a big burst like that, we do a lot of monitoring, proactive monitoring, just to make sure we understand if any future leaks have occurred. We're finding that is starting to leak, not big leaks, but very small leaks, but something we just do not think is a palatable risk to our customers. And therefore, we're investing that £7 million on the Queen's Drive section and also the Seven Sisters Road area. And clearly, we're working with the various boroughs and councils to ensure that we minimise disruptions to customers. And we had a drop-in centre last week to take them through our plans and hopefully nullify some of the risks to the businesses to show how we'll compensate them. So we go to the next slide, please. So what other work are we doing in Hackney? So Hackney has had a huge amount of investment in comparisons to the other parts of London over the last 20 years. So if you were to look back 20 years ago, Hackney was the third worst borough for bursts in London. It's now the third best borough for bursts in London. And that's because we've replaced a lot of our old pipes, the 100-year-old pipes, cast iron pipes, with new plastic pipes, which are less prone to bursting. We've installed a lot of smart meters. About 2/3 of the estate have got a smart meter, and we've got another 4,800 to install over the next 5 years. And across the estate, we get about 384 burst mains a year. But we do have high burst rate areas still, which are denoted by the green and the red blobs. So the green, Linda Road, is one that we are commencing with over the next 2 years. So that's something we're progressing with. We've also been given an opportunity with our regulator, and we were working with our regulator on something called a conditional allowance, which is an extra spend item, but we need to make sure that we're ticking a few boxes before we can proceed with those schemes, which we're working with the regulator on getting that approval. But we're excited by that. It's a really good opportunity they've given us. So that's something that, proviso we hit those gates and those milestones they've set, that will enable us to replace another 5 kilometres, and so those red blobs indicated on that diagram to the right on the page. If you go to the next slide, please. So what I just took you through on the previous slide was predominantly distribution pipes. That's small pipes below 12-inch in size. What you also have, which is what happened at Queen's Drive, is big pipes over 12-inch in size called trunk mains. They're very big assets under a lot of pressure, and they have a high risk to customers if they were to fail, from what we obviously saw at Queen's Drive. And in Hackney, 68 kilometres of trunk mains, about 2% of our trunk main network resides in the Hackney area. We've done a lot of work over the last 4 years at enhancing what we call our valve check programme. So we check 12,000 valves a year on these big assets, of which just over 1,000 are in the Hackney area. And we continue on with that programme. That's really important because that helps us shut those pipes in more speedily. So if you take Queen's Drive as an example, we were able to reduce the flow by 50% within the first 3 hours. If we didn't, the impact would have been far greater. So that's very, very important programme that we're continuing with. as I alluded to, we sort of obviously continuing the work at Queen's Drive and Seven Sisters, and we're also completing some work around the Stoke Newington High Street Northwood Road in mid-October, which enables the whole area to become more resilient in the way our water is pumped around. Okay, so we go to the next slide, please. So in terms of key next steps, as Steve alluded to, very much completing the repair of all the properties, returning those last handful of residents back into their properties. Lots of good dialogue with the various emergency planning teams. That's something we'll continue to do. The large investment at Seven Sisters and Queen's Drive is progressing. That will be completed by the summer of 2021, around about the July period, and we're about to commence that work. We're continuing with the additional mains replacement programs. This is the conditional allowance we're working with our regulator on. We should know by early 2021 whether that's able to proceed and whether we can fund the red blobs you saw in the previous slide. And going forward for 2025 to 2030, we'll continue to work with our regulator to see how we can build more substantial programs to increase investment further in replacing pipes. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a snapshot of what we're doing over the next 5 years and how we're trying to do more as part of our conditional allowance. Okay, so that's the end of our presentation. So thank you very much for listening.
Councillor Patrick, can you unmute?
Is Carl on the line? Carl, you'd like to come in, please? So there you are.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Chair. I should say I'm on what seems to be a particularly shaky connection tonight, so apologies if I start to drop out. Do please let me know if you start to be unable to hear me. I'm Carl Feasey. I'm Director for Strategy and Policy of Ofwat. We're the sector regulator for the water sector across England and Wales. Very pleased to be here for the second time, actually. And what I wanted to do this evening really was talk quite briefly, actually, to leave a bit of time for questions, to give a bit of an update on our views on the issues around Thames Water's performance in London and the progress the company is making on addressing the need, particularly for the sort of greater availability of local performance information. Now, it's worth saying that, as you've just heard from Tim and Steve, the company is probably best placed to talk about its own performance and investment plans in most cases. And as the regulator, I'm not always in a position to pass judgment on performance in the most recent period or in a very localized area, and I can't do that based on individual events or insufficient data. But at the last meeting of this scrutiny commission that Ofwat attended, my colleague John Russell spoke a bit about the challenge we've given Thames Water in our price review, which concluded at the end of last year, and that was a challenge on a number of fronts, but in many respects to drive up performance on a number of areas of Thames Water's business: leakage, service interruptions, as I think Steve talked about, environmental performance and resilience, amongst a range of other things. Now, I'd love to be able to come and give you a really meaningful update on the progress the company has made, but I can't really give you a clear view on how the company's performance has shifted since the last time we came to the Commission back in January, or indeed since the Queen's Drive incident happened, for example. And that's because we typically look at a full year's performance, and what we have most recently from the company is their view on their performance for 2019 to 2020. And there is inevitably a universe of nuance and lots of data that we could spend a long time digging into. But what I would say is it's clear that the company's performance in 2019-20 does show some improvement in performance on a number of important metrics, and I think important metrics that will be important both to members of the Commission but also to people in Hackney. Leakage is obviously an extremely high-profile issue, and it's one that Thames has not been performing well on in recent years. In 1920, Thames have reported a significant improvement in leakage performance. There's currently a process going on to finalise the view on whether they met the level of leakage that they committed to in the last price review. The company reported that they have. We've raised some concerns about that based on the way the performance was measured. But regardless, it's quite clear, I think, that it appears that leakage performance has improved a lot, and an enormous amount of work has gone into reducing leakage by the company. And there's also been an improvement in the number of supply interruptions, given that after missing their sort of committed performance levels for supply interruptions over the last couple of years, they've reported meeting it in 1920. And of course, that's an important waypoint on the journey that Tim alluded to briefly, to try and reduce supply interruptions very substantially over the forthcoming period. And I want to come on to reporting and local reporting, because I've just talked about things that have gone well, but given the experience of some Hackney residents on Queen's Drive and potentially elsewhere, it might not feel like those are areas where Thames has improved. So I'll come on to reporting in a minute, but let me also just say that there are also some areas where performance has declined in the last year. And just last week, actually, the Consumer Council for Water, which is the independent consumer watchdog in this sector, published its annual complaints report, and that did show that Thames remains an outlier in terms of written customer complaints, and last year they did see a significant increase in complaints during the year, up by I think about 57% in the year in total. I'm sure there's a lot going on behind that. I'm sure there are lots of reasons that are driving that, including flowing potentially from changes that Thames are making in the business that will, in the longer term, hopefully bear fruit. But to their credit, Thames Water has, I think, acknowledged very clearly that that's an area that they need to improve their performance on, and they've got a programme underway to do that. Now, as I said earlier, there's obviously a huge amount of nuance and detail sitting behind all the performance headlines, and I can only highlight some of the sort of most relevant elements of their performance from the last year. But the point I wanted to make really is that with a company like Thames operating in such an enormous and such a diverse area with very varying operating conditions, not just the difference between London and the Thames Valley, but also between different areas within London, the experience of the generality of customers might not tell you very much about the experience of customers in Hackney or any other specific area. And indeed, I think it's probably...
Have we lost him, or is it just me?
Yeah, it looks like he's lost, isn't it?
No, I've lost
Yeah,
him.
he's gone.
Okay, while we're waiting for Carl, see if he can come back, perhaps I can start questions. I don't. Who wants to start off with questions? Has anyone got questions?
I've got a question, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Wright, and then I've got Councillor Potter.
I was just wondering, I mean, we heard about all the improvements that Thames Water has done for its emergency response and what have you. So, I mean, the message we're supposed to be getting is obviously that if we had another leak on that scale in Hackney again, the response would be much better. I just wonder, has there been another large-scale leak anywhere else since these measures have been introduced, so that it's actually been put to the test at all?
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me? Okay, my computer's crashed and the internet crashed. Oh, great. Okay, thank you. So, great question. I would say that we have.
Is that Carl back?
No, that's Steve talking.
It's
Yeah, I know it is.
Oh, Carl's back. Yeah.
It is. Apologies for dropping out. Would you like me to continue briefly, or allow Steve to answer the question?
Perhaps allow Steve to answer the question, because we didn't know how long you'd be gone, and so we wanted to crack on. But perhaps you could come in and finish off your information once Steve's answered that question. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've had. I think it's fair to say that a trunk main burst on the scale of what we saw in Queen's Drive is not something that we have seen, and to be honest, we've not seen many of those in our history, but we have had large trunk mains of a similar size burst. We've had 2 occasions where that's really happened since Queen's Drive. The first one was outside Southwark Tube Station, so clearly the risk there was to the tube station at Southwark and a number of local properties. And the second one was at Staples Corner on the North Circular. Was another major burst that we had. In both cases, we were able to enact a new incident response and new incident structures. And it's difficult for me. I think it was a lot better. We were able to respond quicker. We isolated the main very quickly. I think at Staples Corner it was in 53 minutes. It was fully isolated and people were back in water. We did get, and I don't want to put, is that on the Southwark burst and the response workers with the structures that lined up with the London Fire Brigade, they did compliment us and saying it was the best response they'd seen from Thames Water on any large mains burst at the time, and that was from London Fire Brigade. That's not my words. So, do I say we are perfect yet? I'm never going to say that. I think we've still got things we can learn and improve. We'll always be striving to get better and respond. But so far, the 2 bursts we've had since, then yes, I think there has been improvements. And clearly, I think if there's one area I want to pick up on, the 2 things is that we would like to build the relationships that we've started to build with Hackney, with the other boroughs of London.
Okay, thank you. Carl, yeah.
Just very briefly on that, I guess the other bit I just wanted to draw members' attention to was the stuff on page 6 of the presentation from Thames Water, which is about the fact that while it's no substitute for the real thing, there was a simulation exercise that was carried out in terms of understanding the impact if something happens again. And my understanding is that there's another one of those plans for a subsequent state as well. So it's, like I say, not a substitute for the proof is in the pudding, how these things actually respond in real life. But those sort of joint working to try and simulate as much as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Selman. It does sound like there has been some progress from when we first did this investigation into the burst in Stoke Newington. It sounds like a lot of work has gone on and things have moved on. And Thames does seem to have taken on board some of our criticisms of their lack of emergency planning and how they respond not only on the technical side but how they deal with residents. Carl, I know you dropped out, and I know it's not your fault. We all drop it. It happens to all of us. I don't know if you want to carry on and say a bit more. Sorry.
Only very briefly, actually, Chair. I'm not actually sure when I dropped out, but what I was getting around to saying was actually an important thing that the company committed to in our price review at the end of last year was developing some robust measures of performance at the London level to give everyone, including customers and local authorities, more visibility on how the company is performing in London versus the rest of their area. I understand the company is working in earnest on meeting that commitment, and we'd expect to see London level reporting alongside the annual sort of general company-wide reporting that the company produces in July each year. We'd expect to see that start to emerge next year, and that should go on into the future. But what I particularly wanted to say was that I would expect that council officers will probably want to engage directly with the company to discuss how that reporting can be made most relevant and accessible both to residents and councillors and officers to try so that you can get the most out of the information that the company has. And I'm sure that over time they will want to evolve that information so that it can hopefully be more granular. And I know the company has been engaging with a fairly wide range of stakeholders to think about what they should be reporting on, I think I would expect there is still an opportunity to influence exactly what those products look like to ensure that you're getting the most value out of them. That's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Councillor Potter, I think you're the ward councillor for Queen's Drive, I believe. So you were quite involved.
Yes, I am, Councillor Patrick. Thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you very much for your presentations, both Thames Water and Ofwat. I'm going to focus on the recovery side of things and the repairs to the residents who were impacted severely by the flood on Queen's Drive. And I'd just like to acknowledge the huge disruption that those residents have had during this last year, and the fact there's quite a significant number who are still not back in their homes. And I understand, I know you said that it might just be a few weeks till everyone's back in their home, but some feedback I have got from residents, it isn't the case. They seem to think that it's going to be quite a bit longer. So it'd be good to get some further feedback on that, because it isn't quite what I have been led to believe. I suppose what I'd like to do is address very quickly 5 kind of key themes that have repeatedly cropped up. I'm of course not going to refer to any individual cases, but I just thought it'd be really good for you to respond on these key themes. In some ways, it might be more relevant for a kind of future similar situation, but there might be further improvements that can be made during, the process currently. If I just start off with contents, I've had quite a lot of feedback from residents that when they've moved back to their homes and their items have been returned, quite a lot of items have been missing. Some items haven't been sufficiently clean, so some of the items have been mouldy and damaged. Some of the items were disposed, particularly, some people referred to valuable and sentimental items which were disposed without consultation. So I think the communication and, the kind of care around the kind of storage, I think needs to be looked at. And I know several residents will want to follow that up with you in terms of, their kind of claim. In terms of works, there's a variety of feedback. Some residents have gone back to the homes, are very happy to be back in the homes. It's beginning to feel like home again, and their experience has been positive. So many other residents are finding that isn't the case, and some things are now starting to fail, and there are issues, and also there is damp returning. I'm sure you're aware of some of these issues. Damp seems to have been quite a feature of some of the feedback that I've got, with many residents feeling that the dryers were removed too quickly, that the properties are still damp. There's still being those that are having works done at the moment, they're being told by, say, the flooring contractor that they can't fit the flooring yet because, the damp, because the walls are still too damp. And I know there was quite a lot of dispute with residents about whether damp-proof course should be installed or not. There was, residents were really having to argue their case about whether they had pre-existing DPC, and that seems to have been a big issue. And I know the response from Thames Water was that they didn't want to do any work that weren't there previously. But I think there's a case being made that where there is a dispute, perhaps, erring on the side of possibly there was DPC because so much plaster has been hacked off, might have been a more generous approach to take. Insurance. I know many residents are not happy with the claims that they've been offered, and sometimes they can be significantly lower than the amount that they feel that they are due. And sometimes they've felt they've been treated like fools, or they've not been treated kindly. And often it's residents have stated very clearly to me that they were very bold in making their claim, and they felt that was the only way they could do it. And they left no doubt for ambiguity. So many residents who are not so confident about the system, who perhaps were a bit ambiguous about, well, you know, it might have been worth that, or I might have lost that, or I just kind of worry that some residents have fallen short of this process in terms of not getting their kind of fair value for the items they have lost. So that's insurance. The other thing to say about insurance is that the feedback was that residents who went through their own insurance company on the whole seemed to feel that they got a better claim as a result. So that's something that I would quite like some answers on going forward. In terms of temporary accommodation, also we need to acknowledge that many residents went through quite a series of hotels and different accommodations, but the quality and the effort and the standard were very good, and most feedback I had about that was quite positive. The difficulty that many residents had is that often they were given notice to quit quite quickly, sometimes when their homes were not ready. Sometimes it felt like their hand was being forced, that they had to go back home when, as a way of trying to encourage them to accept the claim that they were being offered. And also sometimes just communication around between the agency managing the temporary accommodation and the resident wasn't sufficient. I mean, I do know cases where some private tenants who were hoping to return to Queen's Drive got so disheartened with the process that they just thought, that's it, I've had enough, I'm calling it quits and I'm moving on. So, it wasn't quite the happy kind of move on that they had planned or wanted to do. So finally, I just thought I'd just comment a little bit about the process in terms of communication. So residents described sending 400 emails in total. I know this isn't the same for everybody, but it just gives an example of many residents have felt that they've had to devote so much of their lives to micromanaging the situation, not spending sufficient time on work and family, and often there was a lot of counterclaim and counter blame involved, and it's just been an incredibly difficult process. So I kind of like some feedback on how you think perhaps you can improve the process for many that are still in that situation, and perhaps how you can improve it for residents who find themselves in this position in the future going forward. Sorry, that's a bit of a long one, but most of the questions from me. If you can provide some answers tonight, that'd be welcome.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think it's important that we have the feedback. So thank you for that. I'll just make one point of clarity, and then hopefully I didn't confuse people earlier. When I spoke about the numbers of properties and I mentioned about people coming back in the next few weeks, sorry, I was only referring to the ones where we've been doing the refurbishment work. We know there are still a number of people that are out of their property and will be for quite some time. But in those cases, I was primarily referring to where we've used our own contractor aspect to do the refurbishment work. I know of at least 15 families that will be out for much longer, but that is going through another insurance process. So I apologise if I cause any confusion there. I know that's not. It was only in relation to those. I think the one thing I would say is that we first off, it's. For us, it has been difficult. It's been incredibly difficult for the residents, and we have, we've had a dedicated team. We still have a dedicated team working with the residents. So we haven't walked away. The same people are available. Clearly, obviously, all the snagging we want to understand, and they will be around to try and deal with all that snagging. So we're not, again, I get a list regularly, and I know we've conversed, Councillor Potter, on a number of particular cases. So I very much keep abreast of each of those. It's fair to say that we have had, I think you're absolutely right, we have had a number of questions around whether the extent of damp-proof or damp-proof course that was there prior to the burst, and we've restored the property, and I guess we've referred to our experts there and the people who refurbish properties to restore it to the condition it was before. We do have a number of cases, I'm aware of at least 2 or 3 where we've got where there is some dispute to whether damp proof course was available or not, and we are still working with our specialists and experts in that particular aspect, and sharing those reports and all that information with the residents. So I think, I think the feedback is clearly something we need to take on board. I'll be honest, I'm a little disappointed. There's a couple of bits that I am disappointed here, particularly around where people have used their own insurers, because we've very much, we have a couple of customers who've actually approached us to see if they can transfer to us, because they're struggling with their own insurers and we can't get access to help them, and they've come to us and we've picked that up in their case. So I'm sure it's a mixed bag, but I do recognise that, for those customers, Councillor Potter, I think if you again can write to me and lay out those customers that are in that position and still have issues, then we would by all means, I would personally look into those and see what we can do to help.
Okay. How about the kind of communication where there's, counterclaim and, people are not getting responses for quite a long time? And I mean, can we do some work to try and make sure that people are getting all the information they need and communication is responded to quickly?
Yeah, we do. I will make sure that happens. I think for me, like I say, we've still got some dedicated people to the situation doing that, so they haven't walked away. I know there's people in my team. I think if there are, clearly we've particularly been working with, I think it's about 173 residents and properties, because external and internal there's been. If you would be happy to share with me, obviously clearly not, but share with me those that have particularly had issues, we will personally step in and make contact and make sure that we pick up that breakdown of communication.
I mean, one thing I do want to acknowledge is that I seem to, the feedback from council tenants as opposed to leaseholders is much, much better. And also, I think from housing associations as well. So what I get the sense is when there's an organisation that's representing the residents on the property, the kind of experience for the resident appears to me much better. But the experience for, individual residents, it's very much the feedback is that it feels like a battle, that fight on every single point. So that won't be the case for everybody. I think it's the case for a significant group of people. So I think work needs to be done to address that. Okay,
thank you. And that was never our intention. Clearly, never to give people to have that difficulty. But yes, if you would be happy to share that with me in those particular cases, then we will pick those up and speak with those residents.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. I may have missed the response, but when you showed the red dots and said that they were the vulnerable areas in your slides, you say you're waiting on Ofwat to give agreement, I think, to the spend.
So we have something called a conditional allowance, which is a pot of money which requires us to go through a number of steps and what we call gated process, which we are working through with the regulator Ofwat at the moment. It's a really good opportunity because it's testing our processes and helping us learn and grow and improve our asset management processes to show that we're spending money in the right area. Where the first of those gates needs to be completed by this December, and the most important gate, May next year, is where we confirm the exact scope, the exact cost benefit, the more stretching targets we'll set ourselves and therefore our board, which will then be able to agree with the regulator. And if that all gets approved, I can then come back and portray whether if they are to be funded or not. The likelihood is, provided that we pass those steps, those red dots would be as part of that case, because we believe they are good value for money to remedy. But that's the steps we need to go through with the regulator over the next 9 months or so.
Is there a risk that they might burst?
In terms of where they rank against our sort of the kilometres we've got currently in our plan, they aren't as high as the other risks. Clearly, there's always a risk that a pipe might burst. Not that these are pipes not to the scale of you saw at Queen's Drive, which are trunk mains, 24-inch, big pressure. This is distribution mains, which is more of an issue around leakage, traffic disruption, as opposed to risk to flooding people's properties. But there is a risk. Unfortunately, there's always a risk with a pipe. Even if you put a new pipe in the ground, there's a risk there. But they're usually ones that fail. These are the types of pipes, if you want to get quite technical here, burst about two times per year per 1,000 kilometres. So it could burst, it might not. It's quite difficult to portray. It depends on weather, soil conditions, lots of different parameters.
Okay. You make a lot in your slides about the smart meters and how good they are. Obviously, the pricing is a different issue, which I won't go into here, because and obviously large families obviously end up paying perhaps more for water if they use a lot of water. But I just wondered how much money they actually save residents, in the sense of, you say that they're used to find leaks on residents' pipes. I just wonder how often you find that is used, and how much that saves residents, and how you let residents know.
So can I add something on it about smart meters? I like to know about smart meters, to be honest, more. Are you charging any installed fee for the smart meters? And also, what's the benefit of the smart meters for your work, also for the customer? If we are charging to install smart meters, is there any customers, like low-income customer families, household, are they excluded or included? So could you please mention about it more? Can you give us more information?
No problem. So I guess, why do we have meters and smart meters? So it's clearly to understand usage and leakage, and we deploy those as part of our long-term sort of our plan. So we have to do something called a water resource management plan, which looks over the next 80 years for 1 in 100 year drought scenarios to ensure we can meet supply for customers. And by doing that, you make sure you produce new water feeds, but also reduce demand. And you reduce demand by reducing leakage and reducing usage. And a massive part of that arsenal is smart meters. That's why we put them in the ground. And smart meters can reduce usage by up to 20% per property. A normal meter, which gets read once a year, someone who might walk down the road, will be about 11%. So they're twice as effective as what would an old mechanical meter that people would have just read once a year. So that's why we put them in the ground. In terms of how good they are at finding leaks, it's proved that about 30% of our leakage is on the customer side. So we find about 30% of our leakages through meters or through the customer side pipe work. So it is good at finding that activity, and over the last 5 years, it's enabled us to find and repair about 70 megalitres worth of leakage. That's about 35 Olympic size swimming pools through our smart metering program. So quite a successful program. And in terms of all the elements on our arsenal at reducing leakage, is one of our cheapest items. So as a guide to reduce leakage by a megalitre, smart metering costs you around about £1 million per megalitre. If you were to do that through replacing pipes, it's 10 times more expensive. So it's a lot more cost beneficial to customers in the short term. In terms of sort of the affordability for customers, you're right, Councillor Patrick. If you're a large sort of number of bodies in your household, it could cost you more. It might not do, but it's probably more likely to cost you more. If you live in a large property and there's only 1 or 2 people there, it will save you money from your normal sort of rates you'd incur. So it depends on the number of people in a dwelling is the usual factor. Or clearly, some people use more water than others. So it does depend on a case by case basis. In terms of how do customers pay for the works Thames Water do, so for every pound we spend, and this varies between parts of the water business and wastewater business, as a guide, very roughly, half will get funded through customers and half comes from our shareholders through leveraging debt. Okay, so that's how it works in the round. There's lots of numbers within it, but if you think of it as such, so half customers, half our shareholders. So the cost of the meter is essentially split by the shareholders and by customers. But if we were to find a leak on that asset, so you find a leak on the customer's supply, Thames Water actually have a policy, but we will come and fix that for customers. So we will come and fix that leak for free. We will not charge you for that extra water. That may have been the leak. We'll come and fix that for free. So we have a very customer-friendly policy, and we're only one of the few water companies that actually offer a free service. A lot actually charge customers for it or make customers do it at their own cost. So we actually do it for free as part of that service. When we install a meter, we don't just install a meter and go. We have a very large smarter home visit program where we come into customers' homes, pre-COVID clearly, talk to the customer, educate, actually fix if you have a leaking toilet, fix that issue for you. So we do that as part of the service. And also we have a tariff setting where if you are harder funding, we are actually doubling that program this AMP period. So nearly 300,000 customers could be afforded a 50% reduction in their bills as well. So we have a program there which supports people who can not afford to pay their water bill. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions before we finish this item? Councillor Potter. Councillor Potter.
Apologies, Councillor Chair. My question was actually to the committee. I was wondering whether the committee would consider re-looking at this again in 6 months' time. I wouldn't want another year to go by before before this was scrutinized.
You took the words out of my mouth.
That was quite a simple question, but I hope you will be able to consider it.
I was going to suggest that we have a report back next March, which will be the last meeting of this commission in this financial year. It doesn't need to be a major item unless things have gone very badly wrong, but it'd be interesting to know where we are with resident satisfaction and residents being back in their homes and seeing. Hopefully nobody will still be out of their home by then, but it'd be interesting to find out, and we could have a report back from Thames Water and also from Ofwat if they've got any comments to make. I was quite interested in Ofwat's comment that Thames Water have got more complaints this year than last year. I don't know how it feeds into our work, but it might be worth having a look into that and seeing where the complaints are coming from and what they are, and maybe Thames Water could come back and tell us, because they have. I mean, I can see you have done lots of work on improving your interface with customers, certainly in what happens on the day and what happens just afterwards, compared to what it was like a couple of years ago. On your last slide, I was a bit curious, and you talk about what happens on the day, and you draw. There's a diagram of all the different teams, and you call them control towers. And I would have thought that control tower 2, which is customer resolution lead, would work quite closely with customer public information, but they don't seem to be connected in any way. For everyone that's got, it's the last page. It's the appendices on Thames Water presentation. I would have thought, informing members of the public as well as your customers would have been quite important.
So let me just explain that. There's a subtle distinction. So as you know, there will be the control towers are the terminology that's it's kind of industry practice. It's not something we've made up. We've adopted a recognised model. Just very quickly, we have a customer control tower called a public information. The customer tower is very much about what we've spoken about tonight. It's very much about having people on the ground available to support customers, whether it's with alternative water, alternative accommodation, but particularly a very much more personal support, where the information is very much about making sure we communicate on the wider scale. So particularly if you take Queen's Drive, there's a particular thing about the people and residents that were affected, but there was a broader impact of about 20,000 customers who then lost supply and had low pressure while we repaired. And the public information makes sure that we keep in touch with all those other people that are affected, and elements of councils and stakeholders like Ofwat, or maybe the GLA, etc. So they're very much thinking about the communication to the wider community. The customer element is very much the customers that have been impacted and how we support those.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending. That's been very useful. Councillor Potter, thank you for your questions. To any residents that are listening, I think if you do have questions, you can either obviously direct them to Thames, or if you need assistance, Councillor Potter can assist where possible. Okay, thank you very much for that. Been a very interesting item, and we'll have you back in March. I'd like to move on now to item 5, which is the update of the impact of COVID-19 on Hackney housing services. I believe we've got David Padfield, the Interim Director, and it's pages 7 to 12 in the main agenda.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Chair. Tracy, are you going to do the slides, or shall I do them myself?
Bear with me, David. I'll find them and put them up.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. I'll just start talking then. The slides are only sort of just a very brief summary of the main points of what I'm going to be talking about. So I last addressed this commission about the housing services response to COVID on 13th of May. So at that point, we were still very much in the thick of lockdown, and I briefed you about essentially how we were keeping the essential services up and running, whilst at the same time suspending the non-essential services, mainly to protect our residents and also to protect our staff who were delivering those services. So now, obviously, most of our services have resumed, and setting aside for a moment the possibility that Boris Johnson might require us to resuspend anything, I think I can now offer you a more complete account of sort of how we supported residents during that very difficult lockdown period, the current position of housing services at the moment, and also sort of looking forward, how the events of the last 6 months might shape how the service changes in the future. So just to recap, overall, I'm incredibly proud of the way that housing services staff responded during the whole crisis. So DLO staff, who I think really deserve to be singled out for their work here, they continue to undertake emergency repairs all the way through lockdown. And during that period, they completed more than 6,000 urgent repairs. Other DLO staff volunteered to help with the council's wider humanitarian assistance programme, and during that period they delivered more than 13,000 food packages and hot meals to our most vulnerable residents. Our office-based staff, they switched to home working almost seamlessly. I'm still amazed at the way in which that switch took place right across the service. But as well as that, we did manage to maintain a presence on our estates. We've had a skeleton service operating out the service centre all the way through on housing management, but also that enabled us, whenever there have been emergencies, sort of fires or big ASB events, we've been able to get out onto the estates. And we've also, all the way through this, managed to keep up our health and safety inspections on estates, albeit at a slightly changed frequency to what we would normally delivered. Our contact centres, which at the start of lockdown moved under corporate management and will now be staying under the management of the corporate customer services team, have coped admirably all the way through this. Grounds maintenance carried on to make sure that during lockdown, the green areas on our estates were well maintained. And unlike an awful lot of other social landlords, we actually carried on letting void properties during the lockdown period, so we could get some of our families out of temporary accommodation. So we let a lot fewer properties than we would have normally, but we did keep it going during that period. When I was here last time, we talked about the calls that we were making to our vulnerable residents, both tenants and leaseholders. So overall, we made more than 6,000 telephone calls to vulnerable residents. And we also set up the incredibly popular Let's Talk service. So this was whereby we trained up some of our staff to just talk to residents who were lonely or just feeling frightened by whatever was going on. And overall, they took over 500 calls, and we received a huge amount of praise for being able to offer that service. It just felt very, very, very successful and very necessary at the time. So now we're operating a lot more normally, albeit with some changes. So our repairs service is mostly back to business as usual. And about 98% of our properties have got current gas certificates. Now, in normal circumstances, that would be terrible, because our normal benchmark is to do something like 99.8%. So 98% is falling well off the pace. However, we do still have access issues. People don't want to allow us into some properties, and we're benchmarking with other social landlords as well. And 98% at the moment is looking like a really good figure for us to have. Our capital program is back up and running at pretty much full capacity. And this was the time when we were supposed to be reletting those big capital delivery contracts. So because now isn't necessarily the best time for us to be going to market. So we've extended our existing contracts to give us a bit more leeway about when we go to market and do that really big tendering exercise. We had Councillor Lynch asked me to mention leaseholders earlier on. So during lockdown, we had a moratorium on issuing them with Section 20 notices because we couldn't do the consultation properly. We didn't want Section 20 notices dropping on people's doormats during that period. But unfortunately, due to that and some other complications, that is going to lead to a bit of a lull in our capital delivery in months to come. I mentioned already most of our office-based staff switching to working from home, but doing a great job. But we have kept our satellite district housing offices at Stamford Hill and Queensbridge to Beauvoir. We have kept them closed, and with the sort of second wave at the moment, we've got no current plans to reopen those two offices. So on the whole, I think housing services has coped really well, especially given the increase in reports of noise nuisance and antisocial behaviour as well that we've had to deal with during this period. All of our community halls remain closed. We had started moving towards a limited programme of low-risk activities, but again, with the change in regulations in the last few weeks, we've had to row back on that. But one piece of good news is that all of our many estate playgrounds and moogas are all still open at the moment, and hopefully that can remain the case. Our resident engagement activities have taken a big hit. As you can imagine, we haven't been able to do all the myriad meetings that we have. But what's interesting is that some of those resident engagement meetings, including our big RLG meetings, have now moved on to Zoom. And whilst there have been some teething troubles with that, as I'm sure you know from your own experience of the committee, it is quite an exciting development to be able to do that. One issue that has loomed very large is rent arrears. Rent arrears is a big challenge for us. Since the start of lockdown, we've seen residential rent arrears increase by, I think it's about 2.3 million now, which is a huge increase. It's not entirely unexpected. We did start off at the beginning of this forecasting that maybe a sort of worst case scenario might be overall a £5 million increase in rent arrears. Now that is looking like a possible outcome. As you will know, with the winding down of the government's furlough scheme, we are expecting probably see a second wave of job losses kicking in during the autumn. So we are expecting those arrears to keep increasing. And obviously, there is going to be a financial impact of that on HRA finances. It's inevitable. And I think I might have mentioned before in May, the HRA's got quite a large commercial portfolio. And inevitably, we're also seeing a hit on rent arrears in the commercial portfolio as well. One piece of good news, leaseholder service charge collection has actually held up pretty well during this period. But we'll continue to be monitoring that and just see whether that continues to hold up as well as it's done so far. So looking forward, we already knew we were going to have to make significant HRA savings going forward. That's primarily a result of the government's previous policy of rent reductions. We've covered a lot of ground in terms of the savings and cost reductions that we've made, but we knew there was still a bit of a gap to cover. And there were some big cost pressures on the housing revenue account that we needed to cover off as well. Two that I'll mention here. One is obviously all the health and safety stuff that we've had to do post-Grenfell, which has been very expensive. But also there have been a number of things like pension pressures on the housing revenue account, which has eaten into our reserves. And another thing that's diminished reserves as well is, I'm sure committee will be aware of some legal stuff in respect of Thames Water. So we've made provision for that as well. So we've got that £2.5 million every year from the HRA for the next 3 years. But if rent arrears do continue to deteriorate beyond our current projections, that figure could increase. So fortunately, one silver lining from the pandemic is it has resulted in some interesting changes of working, and that has raised some interesting questions for us to answer about what the organisation might look like in the future, or how housing services might change in the future. So some of the questions we're looking at is, given how easily a lot of our staff can now work from home, do we really need to maintain such a large office footprint for the future? And now that we've made almost all of our systems paperless, do we really need to spend so much time on administration? And as well as that, we've got a very exciting ICT program that should be improving the efficiency of the way in which we're doing things. So again, will those new IT systems enable us to operate more efficiently and take help us close that savings gap on the housing revenue account? We also need to think about how recent months may have changed the way in which our residents might want to interact with us. So most residents are quite happy, or seem quite happy at the moment, have migrated away from some of the face-to-face transactions that we do in favour of other channels of communication. So whilst in many cases that's clearly detrimental and is clearly second best, so where people have got high support needs, or where we might want to do things like tenancy audits, which are pretty much ground to a halt, unfortunately. There are other areas where I think we can probably improve on what we're doing and work on that to everyone's benefit. So the way in which we're currently discussing this as well is is there an opportunity to sort of move away from face-to-face contact as a sort of default option for the way in which we communicate to people, to it actually being our high value method of contact, where it adds most value to the transaction, or where it's most needed. So future lockdown risk notwithstanding, I think those are the questions that are going to be occupying us over the next 6 months or 12 months. So I'd really welcome any input that LiH Hackney Scrutiny might have this evening to help us shape that debate going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Seems like some positive things have come out of it and some non-positive things like the rent arrears. You talked about that you're not in some of the housing offices. Is there any physical presence that residents can go to if needed to at the moment?
Yes. So in terms of the housing management service, the day service, we've maintained a skeleton service at the Hackney Service Centre all the way through this. So and that's enabled residents to come in once they were allowed to come into the Hackney Service Centre if they need to, but also for those staff to go out and about on the estates. And in recent weeks, we've increased the level of that skeleton service just so we've got that bit more resilience. But obviously, an awful lot of our staff weren't able to do their jobs from home. So I mentioned, I think, like the DLO, obviously our plumbers can't do their plumbing from home. So those staff have been coming in and have been a physical presence to us throughout all this.
I mean, I would like to commend the work of the DLO and all council staff, those working at home. It's not always easy to work at home, and those who have moved to home and has so swiftly and so successfully, and also those who are coming in both on our estates and at the service centre. I do think all our staff, wherever they work, have played a blinder in this situation and really shown what public service is about. So I do like to congratulate our staff. I just wonder whether any members have got any questions. Councillor Ette.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to echo what you've just finished saying, and that's by thank you, David, for the presentation, first of all. and also to thank our DLO staff and every member of staff. Honestly, it's a lot of good work that in terms of what they have done, and we sincerely appreciate them a lot. A question came up from one of my residents for gas safety in terms of and she called me and said the staff that came in were not using anything to protect themselves. So I just wanted to know, when they go into flats and stuff like that, aren't they supposed or meant to use probably like gloves or face mask, because she had a very great concern when they left her house and she called me. So I would just like to have your feedback on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm quite worried to hear that. All of our staff who are going into properties should be using the correct protective equipment. So I will certainly be taking that up with the gas team. Most of that work we do ourselves via the DLO. Some of it at the margins is done by external contractors. So I don't know whether that would be our staff or the contractors, but either way, it shouldn't be happening, and I'll pick that up with the team.
Could I ask a bit about the arrears? I mean, I understand why arrears are going up, but what work we're doing with residents, one, to help them, assist them in claiming benefits if that's what they need to do, or checking that they generally are in arrears. I mean, I know it's better these days, but in the past, people didn't always pay their rent, even if they could pay their rent. I'm sure, unfortunately, that still may be the case, but I would like to know what work we are doing with genuinely people genuinely in arrears who have lost their job or are on short-time working. And as you say, with the furlough scheme about to finish, we are expecting perhaps a lot more people to lose their jobs. And are we sending out information to people? Are we directing them anywhere? Is there pre-work going on with people before they get into this situation, letting them know what they can do as soon as they lose it? Unfortunately, if they lose their job, especially as we're expecting people to lose their jobs with furlough ending, I'm not, it'd be a terrible situation. But if the furlough finishes, we do know that lots of people will lose their jobs, especially as the new business support system won't support as many jobs, and it's much more restrictive in what it does support and who it supports and how much it offers. It may not be much use to a lot of residents in Hackney.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So as part of our rent collection operation, we have a financial inclusion team who can provide all of that advice and all of that assistance to our residents, including in terms of claiming benefits and anything else that they might be entitled to as well, in terms of things like sort of discretionary housing payment or homeless prevention grant or anything like that. So our emphasis throughout this process has been getting people to talk to us, and we've done some joint work with council tax on that as well, to just make sure that our messaging is consistent. Because that sort of talk to us message has been exactly the same for council tax. And obviously an awful lot of residents have been in touch with us, and the financial inclusion team have been doing their job. I suppose one of the things that's worrying is that there is quite a large cohort of people who haven't contacted us and are not paying anything towards their rent at the moment. And that is the cohort that we are currently worried about, and we really do need to start engaging with that cohort, because the sums of money that they are owing is growing rapidly.
Thank you. I'm not sure that people realise, I mean, obviously if people can't afford to pay, they can't afford to pay for genuine reasons, but people do realise that their rents actually do pay for the services. So I'm not sure that people always quite put to that the match always comes out in people's heads, that their rents actually pay for the services that they get. I mean, obviously we know there's very genuine cases at the moment. I think you've done marvellous work. What do you think has been the main thing that you'll take forward, apart from reducing, perhaps looking at the way your staff work? Do you think where the future of our housing services lie? what so what do you think we've gained from this, if anything?
Well, this is very much a work in progress at the moment. So we know, we're not the only organisation in the world that's learning lessons from COVID. I think a lot of organisations are having very similar conversations. So what we've done is we've set up a series of staff workshops where we talk to our frontline staff, or we talk to our middle managers around what's worked for them, about what's not worked for them during this. What they think the future might look like. So we've certainly seen a huge number of staff right across the council saying that they would like to, carry on working from home, maybe sort of 2 or 3 days a week in the future. So we're working through those ideas with staff. We're doing that in parallel to developing these new IT systems, and I think we will arrive at. I don't know about a new operating model, but some new ways of working, which I think will, as I said during my presentation, have some impact probably on the size of the office footprint that we're funding, but also on the way in which we do some of our face-to-face contact, and possibly the balance of who we're seeing in the office or who we're talking to in other ways. So I think that is something we'll be developing probably over the next 18 months. And I don't think it's necessarily going to contribute to the £2.5 million we've got to take out of the budget in next April, but it will probably contribute towards the savings target the year after that.
Okay. Councillor Ette.
Chair, can you check the chat, please? And I've also sent you WhatsApp. There are members willing to ask questions there.
Sorry, I can't see them.
Okay. Councillor Rudd, what is up for question? Councillor Anthony.
Sorry.
Can you check the chat, please? Thank you.
I'll check in the chat. The last I can see is my chat finishes at 17:00.
Okay. How about your check your WhatsApp message, Chair?
Oh, sorry, I hadn't scrolled down. Sorry, cats are out.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about community halls. I mean, obviously, we appreciate.
Thank you. Sorry.
We can't just reopen the community halls in a hurry, but I'm a bit disappointed that some of the facilities that the community halls have, in particular those community halls like one in my ward, New Kingshold, and also the Gascoigne 2, which have got fantastic kitchen facilities, which would have been incredibly helpful, certainly during the lockdown, to help provide food, and I think would again be very, very useful as we move into the winter, with people struggling to feed themselves. Especially if we get any local lockdowns, for charities to use those kitchens. So I just wonder if there's any way that you can look at the community hall provision and some restricted opening for support services organised by charities, which could help in the future. I mean, I'll give you an example. In New Kingshold, there's a charity called Food Cycle, which was, until the lockdown, doing a weekly for free for people, and they were essentially thrown out of the community centre pretty much immediately on lockdown, and they had to find facilities elsewhere. They've been cooking elsewhere. I don't think we'll get them back into our ward again now. They've established themselves elsewhere, and that's a real shame for people living nearby. So I just wonder if you could take a less blanket approach to the community centres and perhaps have some kind of a review about what facilities it might be appropriate to use there.
Absolutely. So yeah, we were approached by a number of organisations during this period to be able to use those facilities, and we did some work with various organisations to try and facilitate that. It was very dependent on us being able to do satisfactory risk assessments, both of those particular venues and the activities they wanted to do around cooking and whatever else. So I think some of the community halls did get used at various points. I don't think any of them are in use at the moment for that sort of thing. But we've got a list of, when we were trying to open them, we had a list of sort of low risk activities that we wanted to push forward. And absolutely top of that list was food preparation by charities.
Did you want to help assist Councillor Selman?
Yeah, well, just because it's something that likewise is raised with Councillors Maxwell, Kennedy and I, in relation to the work that we've been doing with officers round about the Community Partnerships Network and the Food Justice Alliance. And in response to that, the officers in that team have been working very closely with Sarah Cooley from Resident Participation and Community Halls team in Housing Services more recently, which has included working out how we can make sure that we can get community hall facilities back up and running so that people can do exactly what you're saying, Penny, which is about organisations being able to use those kitchen facilities. I know for a fact that that includes Gascoigne too, where I know there was problems earlier on. But it was just the update I had today on that was that there was now a very good plan in place for that, which has been developed with the Community Partnership Network, which is that network of different mutual aid organisations and voluntary sector organisations who are providing food support in relation to COVID.
Thank you, Councillor. That's quite interesting. While we're talking about community halls, we did have a report last year about community halls, and obviously the work that the team was doing has got delayed. We are going to have them back, but one of my questions is is linked to the specific use, and that's the digital divide that we keep hearing about. When Gilbert came, he did talk about putting IT and internet in our halls, and I really think that we should use this time, if possible, to think about putting IT facilities, or certainly the internet, in our halls, because one of the things we keep hearing about, certainly for children, is that many of them couldn't do schoolwork because they didn't have computers at home, and there could have been a way that perhaps we could have used our community halls, and perhaps in the future we could use our community halls. And I think it's a really important thing that as more and more services go digital, that we actually put internet in our community halls. But I'm sure that will come up when we have Gilbert back to discuss the community halls review. Sorry, I've got Councillor Osen had a question.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank David for the successful work they achieved during the first lockdown. And then my comment was going to be exactly the same Penny mentioned about we've got fantastic kitchens facilities in our community centres. One of them, for example, in Fellows Court, Mormont Estate. It can be and pensioners' hall. It can be used for the organisations to prepare food for the second wave of the COVID, and we can prepare ourselves. But the organization I was involved with, and then they had a problem with the delivery the meal to residents who needs meal, and they get self-isolated. So is there anything we can do about to help them to deliver a meal? That's the one of my question. So this is the what you mentioned right now about ICT. Is there any way we've got residents who hasn't got internet access? Is there any way we can supply any free internet connection to residents who cannot afford to get the internet access or server? So that's my consideration. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to check who else wants to speak. I've got Councillor Mahan. Did you want to speak, Councillor Lynch, or you were just trying to let me know other people wanted to speak? Thank you. Do you want to answer that? And Councillor Etta, I'll take Councillor Mahan and if you want to answer those questions, David, and then we'll come back to Councillor Etta.
Yes, so two main points there. First of all, in relation to the food delivery. So all of that work, the council had throughout the first lockdown, had a humanitarian assistance programme, and that involved coordinating things like food delivery. What they wanted help with delivery. So we lent them quite a large number of our DLO staff, mainly the painters, who weren't involved in doing any emergency works. And as I said during my presentation, I think over the course of lockdown, they delivered about 13,000 sort of hot meals. So the facilities, the resources there or could be diverted, but I would need to be guided by that sort of wider humanitarian piece of work, really, rather than agreeing anything on the side of that. And on the second point around broadband, the council has quite a large-scale project where we're looking to work with commercial fibre companies to deliver cost-effective fibre to all of our blocks in the States. And what we're looking for in that is to get some benefits from doing that. And two of the main benefits that we're looking at is firstly, a connection to all our halls, which will take care of what you were just asking about there, Councillor Patrick. So we would be looking to get fibre connections into all of our community halls. But also we'd be looking at some sort of voucher system for our most vulnerable or our most needy residents to allow them to have subsidised access to that system. And that's currently something that we're working through at the moment.
Presumably there's a time that's not that putting that broadband connection in our halls isn't imminent then. I don't have a time scale at the moment. I could find one out and let you know if you like. Yes, please. That'd be very interesting. Councillor Ette.
Chair, I wanted to draw your attention to Councillor Anthony Makanda.
Yes, I've got him next.
Okay, that's fine, Chair. And
Thank you.
A quick question to David. Sorry, regarding resident engagement meeting on Zoom. And I'm just thinking, what happens to those that are not on Zoom? How will they be getting across? How will they be getting in touch, communication-wise? What have we put in place when it comes to that? How are we reaching out to them? I just need a bit more detailed explanation on that. Thank you.
So at the moment, this is very, very much an experiment to see how it goes. And we've been led by those TRAs who wanted to do it. So what we've been doing is we've been offering them advice, and obviously with Zoom as well, you can dial in, so people can just phone into the meetings. So at the moment, we're just seeing how that goes and seeing whether how inclusive it is. Councillor Mackenzie, who we've been discussing this with quite a lot, is obviously very worried about issues of digital exclusion and making sure that we're not excluding people. And the other sort of big set piece meeting we've moved on to onto Zoom is the RLG meetings, the resident liaison group, which is our main group. And so far, most members of that seem, or a large number of members of that seem very willing to dial in. I know the chair of that organisation has been reaching out to those members, and we're not aware of anyone from that group who sort of feels specifically digitally excluded as a result of that. But we will continue to monitor it, and we'll move forward very slowly on that. We'll also be looking to sort of some of what's happening nationally and what other organisations are doing, and if there are any examples of best practice out there that we can copy, then we'll do so.
Okay, Councillor Mahan, sorry.
Thanks, Chair.
I hadn't forgotten you.
No, that's okay. That's good. Apologies again. I think I missed the start of the meeting, so I should declare before asking questions that I'm a Hackney Council leaseholder, and I think until today I'm stepping down, but I was Vice Chair of Lordship South TMO as well. But what I wanted to sort of comment on and ask questions about is I wanted to welcome the fact that the resident-led improvement fund consultation is now going direct to residents. Thanks very much for the text message I got this week, kind of sending me to the link. I think that's a really, really big improvement, innovation to the sort of service that I think a lot of us members probably would be frustrated about the fact that the walkabouts that have happened up until COVID were very poorly attended, because understandably balancing up the mechanics of getting officers to walk around all the estates in the borough with them being at times where people aren't at work is impossible. So I think going direct to residents and consulting in this way is a fantastic innovation. It's exactly what I think a lot of us wanted to see. And what I was hoping to ask for is what are the kind of plans for sort of monitoring and reporting back on what that sort of response rate is, and perhaps the Commission might be able to get a a bit of information on that sort of later on in the year. And then my other kind of question sort of linked to that, picking up on the sort of Section 20 sort of pause process, the fact they've had to be paused because of COVID, is also whether there's any way of correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a tenants levy which pays into the resident-led improvement budget. So to a certain extent, tenants are levied as part of or in addition to their rent a sort of a set amount. And I'd be interested to know whether there's a mechanism within the leasehold structure to levy leaseholders in a similar way, which would then take away the need for the Section 20 notices that are required for any works that come out of the improvement consultation that go above the threshold. Technical, long question there, so it could be you need to come back to us on that. But those are my sort of thoughts on the improvement kind of fund and and that question. Thanks.
No, you make some really good points. So first of all, on the text, yeah, we're really excited about that. I think one of the things that we really need to sharpen up is the way in which we communicate with our residents. So we had a big sort of heating outage a few weeks ago, and I was very conscious that staff on the estate pushing letters through people's letterboxes. It just feels such an inefficient way of doing things these days. So the fact we're now able to sort of really sharpen up on that text exercise and use it more broadly for something like resident-led improvements just feels like a really big step forward for us. And it was a bit of an experiment to do it this way as well. And the one thing that we've realised already is traditionally this budget's been underspent because it's been so tightly controlled in such a limited way. Based on the response we've got already, I don't think there's much danger of it being underspent this year. So I'd be delighted to come back at some point in the future and talk a bit more about that programme and what we might be able to deliver this year. Then in terms of, sorry, there was a further point there as well.
Yes, it was about. I mean, it was essentially whether leaseholders can be asked or whether leaseholders pay the equivalent that the tenants pay in the tenants levy, and therefore avoid the need for as much Section 20 associated.
Thank you. Yeah, the reason it's only charged to tenants and not leaseholders is that there is nothing in the lease or the legislation that would allow us to impose that charge on leaseholders. So the only way to do it would be to raise it as a voluntary charge, which would then have implications in terms of the charging. So yeah, I'm always happy to sort of look at creative ways of getting around Section 20 consultation because it does tend to slow things down rather a lot. But yeah, that's something I think has been considered in the past, and we've decided not to go down that route.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ozen, and then we'll finish this part, and perhaps we could come back. We can work out a timescale to come back on those questions that you asked David, because they are.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'd like to ask David. At one of the meetings, I mentioned that we have tower blocks in Hackney. They've got wall cladding, and then which has been taken off. They are mostly over 6 floors or 10 floors tower blocks. In winter time, because of using the hot water and using the more water and heating system, it caused constantly the pipe burst between the flats, and that create the problem with the residents and their household. And what can be done? What can be done to make the work faster and then sort out the problem? Changing the old pipes. Usually, those blocks over 30-40 years old. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councillor. I'm not aware of any burst pipe problems arising from us removing cladding. So after Grenfell,
what I'm saying is the pipe between the flats on the tower blocks bursting constantly. So it's flooded. It causes flooding, and then when it happens to 3 to 5 flats between the 3 to 5 flats. What I'm saying.
Do you want to tell us which block,
For
Councillor
example, one of them is Fellows Court, Tower Blocks, North and South. And what I'm saying is, winter time is coming. It's gonna be more problem. What can we change the pipes between the floods so it doesn't cause any water flowing problem? And then to fix that, you need to get the cladding out, wall cladding out. So I've seen it in Fellows Court, for example. Every time that happens, the flooding is happening between the floods. They needed to took wall cladding out, and then they lived as it is. Now it's being taken out because of the fire safety issues. So while the wall cladding is being out, is there any way can we fix the pipes, the old pipes, which is burst all the time and quickly? Can we sort out that problem in this winter quickly? That's what I'm asking.
If you don't know the answer, David, you look like you don't.
I don't.
Perhaps you could email Councillor Ozen and copy the committee into the answer.
I most certainly will.
If you reply to Councillor Ozen and speak to Councillor Ozen directly, I'm sure he can give you much more detail. And,
I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
And come and let Tracy have a copy of your answer so that it can go in the minutes. Once again, I'd like to thank you for coming, and I think everybody here would like to thank the DLO and all our staff for being so wonderful during this COVID. We hope that we don't get locked down again, but we don't know. I haven't heard what the Prime Minister has said today. I haven't heard that he's locking us down again yet, but we don't know. They seem to spring it on us quite suddenly. What's been going on in other parts of the country. I'm going to call a break now, a comfort break. I make it 1:45, so if we come back at 5:55, and get the smallest room and stretch your legs. So thank you very much. Yes, sorry, Councillor.
Chair,
did you have a question?
Supposed to finish at 9:30. I'm really aware that there's individuals on this call that, for whatever reason, have already had a long day. I'm just wondering do people need a comfort break, or I don't intend to be here after 9:30. I'll be honest, I've been at work and sat in this office chair since 9 o'clock. And it's not that I don't care about things that are on the agenda at all, but I'm just like, are you intending this meeting to carry on till 10:30?
No, I'm not intending to carry on to 10:30.
So we're going to have half an hour for Caroline's bit then.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same position as you, Councillor Lynch. I have been, I have swapped chairs, but I've basically been at this table since 8:30 this morning, so I sympathise entirely with it. I'll call it 5 minutes then, because I certainly do need a comfort break. Unless Councillor, so if we have 5 minutes then, which we would normally when we're arguing about nothing. So 5 minutes back at 10:02 then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, everyone's here, Chair.
Okay, if we can restart. Thank you, everybody. Right, if we can move on to the next item, which is the report back from the Cabinet of our scrutiny into violent crime. I've got Councillor Selman and Maurice Mason. Is there anybody else?
Yeah, Claire Crawley, yeah. Councillor.
Thank you. Welcome. I don't know. Councillor Selman, are you starting?
Yes, no, can do. Just because we also have Jason Davis on the phone as well. But yeah, so just, first of all, I just wanted to start by thanking the Commission for continuing to have a focus on this and having the update on it. I think we've been in the midst of public health emergency around COVID the last few months, but it's really important that we remember that before COVID, one of the key top concerns across London was around about how we were seeking to tackle serious violence, and it's really important that we continue to make sure that that is our a key priority and that we're maintaining focus on it, which is certainly what we've been clear about internally as a council and as a partnership as well. There were some things in particular that I wanted to highlight since we last updated on this back in February. The first is one that I guess coaches all of this really. So while a lot of the focus of the Commission's review ended up focusing very much on gang-related violence and a lot of the work of the Integrated Gangs Unit, I think one of the things that the Commission was also very conscious about was that that was one element that sat within for us to make sure that we were also taking a much broader whole systems approach to tackling serious violence, which I think is reflected in some of the recommendations, in particular around recommendation 12, and then also some of the recommendations about that join up between some of the more preventative work that we do in children and family services, for example, and also about how as a local authority we were being very clear about embedding a public health approach to serious violence, which looked very much not just at being that reactive responding to the sort of the outcome of violence, but also very much tackling the key causes and the broader determinants. So linked to that, one of the key pieces of work that one of our really excellent officers, Christine, has been carrying out over the in recent months has been, first of all, been developing our single serious violence action plan. So there's been sort of two, I guess, key elements of that to date. The first was about us identifying across the partnership, so not just us as a council, across the partnership and with external key stakeholders, what the sort of key principles we wanted to be applying in terms of tackling serious violence. So that was partly about the key strategic principles of what we wanted to do. So, for example, making sure that we were focusing on tackling some of the underlying drivers, as well as responding and tackling to the immediate outcomes of violence, and also enabling principles, so how we wanted to approach things, how we wanted to work. So things like making sure that we were co-producing stuff, working with the community. And then the link to that, then the piece of work she's been doing is working with partners, looking across the different action plans that sit in different places, but which all touch on aspects of how we tackle serious violence, looking at how those meet and marry up against those principles, and then so that we can think collectively as a partnership where we are getting things right or where we might need to have a bit more focus. In terms of where that's at, the sort of latest version of that, or the draft of that, is coming to the Community Safety Partnership meeting tomorrow, so it's premature to fully present on that here now, but what I do think is it would be really sensible, and perhaps it returns to the Commission at a later date so that that can be considered further and looked at, because I think it's quite a good way of getting that broader in the round setting of understanding how across the full council and partnership, not just within the Integrated Gangs Unit, which has a really key role to play, but how we're trying to tackle serious violence in the round. A couple of other things that I just wanted to flag as sort of more immediate updates since the last update that was provided to the Commission. One is just round about the mental health practitioner, which is reflected in a number of recommendations that were put forward. That has now been approved as a new role within the Integrated Gangs Unit. It's out for advert at the moment. So we should hopefully have that additional resource in place imminently, really. And just to flag in relation to that, because I know that the Commission were very keen that we were working closely with ELFT. We've worked closely with ELFT in terms of the development of that role, and there will be a link across as well in terms of line management in relation to that role. And I think that will be a very useful addition in terms of bolstering the already very strong multi-agency work within the Integrated Gangs Unit. The other thing I just wanted to flag was round about the recommendations on increased transparency. There had been a particular specific request round about what is set up on our website. Emma in our comms team has been working closely with Integrated Gangs Unit in terms of the refresh of that webpage, but also making sure that, again, it's set within that broader context. So we've also done a refresh and actually fresh drafting of web pages that also talk to, again, our broader approach to serious violence, and the web copy for that has been signed off and should be, again, up, I think, hopefully by the end of this week. The other thing just to note as well is round about recommendation 1, which is round about how we essentially evaluate and monitor the effectiveness of the Integrated Gangs Unit, which likewise was one of the areas that we had identified as part of the serious violence and gangs action plan of things that we needed to look at and do a broader thinking about how we try to really capture the impact that the unit is having. So Maurice's team have been successful in securing a graduate trainee post. So that will be a post that I think is due to start on Monday, and is that they will be in place for 6 months. So they will be able to then work closely with the unit in order to draft up a framework, so that we can make sure that we are have a robust way of looking at how are we making an impact and making a difference, and going beyond just looking at those high sort of top level indicators in terms of what we're seeing in terms of serious violence trends. The one area that I just wanted to note that needs a bit of follow up on, and which is slightly behind at the moment, which is partly reflective of how much has been on the agenda for the last while, is round about the recommendation 10, round about the employment offer, which was I think when we last updated, our employment services colleagues were going to be working up a series of options that they could present to myself and also Councillor Williams to think about how we might be able to put something together around about that. So that's something that both myself and Councillor Williams will be following up on, so that we can make sure that we are progressing those options, which will then be also taken to the Gangs and Serious Violence Board to think about what a meaningful package could look like in place in terms of the employment offer connected to the Integrated Gangs Unit as well, to supplement the work that's already there by, for example, excellent officers like Delhi with the DWP, who already does a lot of existing very good work with the people that we're working with, but how we can support that work through a broader employment offer with our employment team. So that's a quick sort of run through and update on some of the key sort of highlights from me. Maurice and Claire, I don't know, or Jason, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else or give me a virtual kick in the shins if I've described anything incorrectly.
For me, Councillor Salmon, you've done far better job than I could have done. It covers everything that I needed to cover, so thank you for that. Probably the only other comment that I would add would be recommendation 9, colleagues, which is linked to pre-apprenticeship programs. Just to update you on that, we have actually had several meetings to take this one forward. So the first one was with Councillor Salmon, myself, Andrew, and Councillor Williams at that strategic level. And then I've met with Andrew and also with Claire Crawley, the IGU manager, to take this forward. And an initial piece of work was carried out to ascertain, based on professional judgment and other indices, around what the current take-up would be of individuals who may be interested in apprenticeship schemes. Importantly, not just obviously linked to the gangs matrix in a wider sense, including those individuals who may be vulnerable and at risk. Suffice it to say, and we're constantly reviewing this through the referral process, there isn't a significant number of people that we would think who would be ready to go on to an apprenticeship scheme. So I don't think at this stage it would be value for money to ring fence any apprenticeship schemes. However, Out of the 4 or 5 people that we did identify, 2 of them, hot off the press, have just secured apprenticeships. One at TfL, and Claire, where was the other one? Claire Crawley?
It's in construction.
In construction.
I'm sorry, I can't remember the company.
No, it's okay
name,
with the company. So we've had 2 that have been. But what I would say is, because I initially thought, you know, when I negotiated with Andrew, it did come with, you know, a bit of investment, but, you know, let's make 20 available. Actually, there wouldn't be at this stage 20 people that would be ready to go onto that scheme. But we are, through business as usual, able to identify, and we've had a couple of success stories. And then the only other one, Councillor Selman, I'm in constant contact with the police. The police, in terms of recommendation 14, the police has grown in establishment over the last 12 months and continues to. With, interestingly, concerning this topic, the vast majority of those officers, new officers, and it is a genuine growth, going into what is known as, or the nomenclature of, the violence suppression unit within the police. And we're already, as you can imagine, Claire's already linked in with the detective inspector, so that we've got that synergy and join up between our activities. And then for 15 and 16, there's loads of work that's being done by the police on stop and search and confidence. Stop and search is being reported by the police tomorrow at the statutory officer group meeting. And then the only other one that I would suggest is probably the scrutiny committee, through you, Councillor Patrick, may consider in the future the most suitable time to invite senior police colleagues to come along to give us an update around their confidence action plan, which is obviously informed and supported by the local authority and other key partners. That's my addition to Councillor Selman's input. Back to you, Councillor Patrick.
Shall I just add quickly, I guess, in terms of the serious violence plan, just to sort of say a bit about the process. What we did in terms of the principles, those strategic and enabling principles, was really look across some of the fantastic work that's happening in the partnership and really draw out the principles from those pieces of work, and then created a framework within which we could situate the totality of what we're doing around addressing serious violence. And what that's done is consolidated all the work that's happening into one place, so that we can get that really comprehensive overview of what's going on. A lot of the strategies and plans cross-reference each other, so it's quite difficult when you look at those individually to figure out exactly what's going on across the partnership. So that hopefully will give us that overview and understanding of what's happening, and frame those against those key strategic principles, which in many ways sort of link into a lot of the work that's happening around further collaboration with communities and co-production through the Hackney Young Futures Commission, through the place-based working that we're leading on, and also with the co-production models being looked at for the YBM program as well. So there's some real key links there and a direction of travel in terms of the work there on serious violence. So yeah, just thought I'd add that.
You're muted, Chair, just for your information.
Rathbone. Sorry. I didn't realise I'd been muted. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, it's 2 points. It's about recommendation 3 and recommendation 4. Just with recommendation 3, not that I'm suspicious or anything like that, but the response about getting the IGU, as it were, more into the public arena in terms of on the website. I hope it's not going to take too long, because, you know, it's good work, and I think it does reassure the public. I don't see any reason why, you know, as it were, some of it should not be displayed for people to know about, and so on. And then just about recommendation 4, I just couldn't understand. In the end, it was just very complicated, the response. Is it in actual fact, are you know, children under 18 and their cohort and so on, Are they going to be included more in the process? I mean, I might have misread this, but it just, sorry, it's just all the jargon just got to me.
Okay, we received that update, but just try to clarify. So this is number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah, owned by children and families, and then I'll go to the other one, but owned by children and families, but obviously supported by us. The good news is there's been a huge amount of work that has been put in since the scrutiny committee findings around bringing not just children and families, but other key partners together. So, for example, we now have a monthly extra familial risk panel, which the IGU goes along to, where those individuals at risk, young people, are identified and, more importantly, a proportionate response is provided. We've also got representation from children and families that attends our partnership tasking meeting for the wider community safety, and contextual safeguarding come along to that as well. And one of the areas that is currently being considered, because recommendation 4 was about primarily, enhanced resource being linked into the integrated gangs unit. Well, actually, there is strong consideration being given for a separate unit to be developed within children and families to link in closely with the IGU from a contextual safeguarding point of view, so we don't lose the goodness from our excellent initiative that we had that concluded probably about 6 months ago. So there is really good contact. And then the final part of that, Councillor Rathbone, and it's linked to one of the other recommendations, we've developed and implemented within the IGU, in collaboration with our FAST, the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, a referral process that's well up and running and well established, that encourages people to refer into the IGU and FAST. That will always take precedence. And then research is undertaken for the individual to often, identify any vulnerabilities. And then the individual, therefore, with the background checks, is taken to the extra familial risk panel with safeguarding in mind. And then there's a progress report that's done as a consequence of that to make sure that we're actually moving forward. So in my 3 years, I've never seen actually that sort of, if you like, symbiotic approach that's actually turned into action as well enhanced as it is now at the moment. And then Councillor Salmon will say, Councillor Rathbone, we've done everything around the website. It's like imminent. I would have loved to have had it up and running for today, obviously, but it's going to be up and running this week, and it's practically ready to go live. So back to you, Councillor Patrick, and I hope that answers your questions, Councillor Rathbone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maurice. Good news all the way round.
Seems we've lost Councillor Patrick. Let's hold on a bit.
She's back.
Sorry, connection yet.
She's back.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right, good. Okay, thank you. So, sorry, I missed the end of what Maurice said, but I'm sure it's fascinating. I lost connection. Was there any other questions or any other? I'm really pleased that. Sorry, I'm really pleased that the recommendations have been taken on board, and that the greater work between the integrated gangs unit and the children's services, because we felt that there wasn't enough work. I've got Councillor Ette and then Councillor Ozen.
Thank you, Chair. I really have to commend Councillor Thurman and Maurice and the whole unit, because I can remember when we had this discussion, honestly, where we were then, and from what I have seen in terms of the recommendation being carried out. So I'll say well done to everyone. But one quick question that I just want to ask, which is actually trauma-informed training. That is still under recommendation 4 in terms of the Children and Family Services will also provide trauma-informed practice training within the IGU.
Well, what I would say, Councillor Etty, in the interest of openness, Claire, jump in, that hasn't been taken forward at this stage. And I think actually, and I hope this doesn't come across as being like a bit of an excuse, but probably because, you know, of the COVID situation, but we will, through Claire and our colleagues in Children and Family, progress that and give you an individual update, if we can, in the near future about that one.
Just to very briefly come up, because the recommendation obviously relates specifically in relation to the integrated gangs unit, but obviously part of within the integrated gangs unit is the youth offending team, which forms part of it. And just the fact that in terms of the broader youth offending team, all of that team, including the police officers that are attached to the yacht, as I understand, have been through sort of trauma informed and also a broader suite of training. And also one of the things that we now scrutinise as a Safe for Young Hackney board, which is the board that oversees the youth justice bit of it, is round about how we can see things coming through in terms of reports. So when you look at how officers are drafting up the reports, looking at whether we can see the learning from that training being reflected in how we are recording stuff. So as Maurice says, I think there's still stuff to be scheduled in relation to the gangs unit itself, but there's also been the recommendations also has a current relation to part of, I guess, that unit, which is the youth offending team.
Thank you.
We'll get you an update at Councillor Etty, though, so that you know exactly that we're going to take it forward and to you know, just to meet your concerns there. So no problem. I'm just texting Claire as we're talking.
Thank you very much.
Yep, no problem. I'll look into that and come back to you.
Councillor Patrick, please. Oh no.
Something's happened again.
Yeah, I think it's I want to think it's a connection.
It's that fridge that's behind her. That's causing all the trouble, I reckon.
It's the fridge magnet.
There isn't enough stickers on the fridge, I think.
I just texted. Yeah, I've logged. I need to log off. I keep connected.
Okay. She's trying to log off and then she will log on again. It's connection problem. Pending. I think we're running behind time. So pending.
Can I come in during Patrick? Yes.
Councillor. Is it with relation to the recommendation, Councillor Hudson?
Yeah, it's about violence. What do you call it? Reduction unit. Do we have it in Hackney? If so, if we have, is integrated gangs unit. Do they work with them? Do they share anything? Can we get some information about that?
Okay.
Yes.
May I?
So.
Yes. Yeah.
Of course you can. Yeah, carry on.
Okay. So thank you, Maurice. Is that the answer? Would you get some information down to
yeah,
Councillor Oze with regards to?
Absolutely no problem. I don't know if Claire wants to come in on it. I know you're tight for time, but the answer is yes. The answer is that they are aspiring to have 70 people on the violence suppression unit. Claire has already made contact with the inspector, the detective inspector, who she knows from her days within the police. And we are already drawing up plans where there is that connection. Claire, do you want to add anything for the councillor?
No, there's nothing to add really at this stage. I mean, I can provide a bit of a briefing around what they actually do. Have the relationship there, so there is communication on an almost daily basis. But any more than that, I can follow up with a briefing at a later date if that's sufficient.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Patrick is back on.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't know, my computer it crashes during the day when there's loads of people on, but I don't know why it's crashing now. Perhaps it's all the people listening and watching this meeting. Thank you very much, Claire, and congratulations on taking over as head of the Integrated Games Unit. Thank you. I'd like to move on. It's been really, really interesting. I think we perhaps have another report in the future, because I think this is a topic that's really interesting to members. So I'd like to briefly go on to item 7, which is the update from Thames Water donation. Perhaps, which there's an officer, sorry, I've lost my briefing. Would like to say something very briefly. Councillor Lynch.
Oh yeah, sorry. It was just I'm sure you were going to do it, Sharon. I may have just jumped in before you, but it was just to wish Councillor Selman all the best.
Yes.
Same here.
Just in a similar vein, also just the fact, so Claire has been expertly leading the IGU for the last few months, but also just to flag that Jan Stout, the former head of the unit, I think today's actually her last formal day, and so I just wanted to put on record and note the contribution she's made over the last 11 years, I think, to the gangs unit, and really quite instrumental to a lot of what we are able to then draw on today. So I just wanted to put that on record.
Yeah, I'd also like to put on record Anna's thanks. I was going to mention it, so I know you're going off on maternity leave. I hope you don't mind me mentioning it. It does seem to be public information.
Is it go or go?
Anyway, we'd like to thank you on behalf of the Commission. You've been a wonderful Cabinet member, and we look forward to seeing you back when you come back from maternity leave. You're really a very supportive Cabinet member to this Commission, and you always come and give us such great information and feedback. We really do appreciate it, and wish you and your partner all the best, and your new baby. We hope you have a pleasant and painless birth.
Caroline, you will be missed.
And not sleepless nights.
I hope that's true.
It is.
It is. Cool. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure that there'll be other discussions and good wishes in other meetings. But as I keep getting told off, we're running late, but I'm sure people won't mind us doing that. Item 7. So I know there's an officer on the line on the committee from the grants. If anybody's, Councillor Rathbones really led on this, and I'd like to thank him and Councillor Gordon for all their work in sorting out the grant, the money we got from Thames Water, and making sure it was allocated fairly. I don't know if anyone's got any questions to the officer or to Councillor Rathbones. Sorry.
Hi there, Chair. So I'm the Grants and Investment Manager of the Council.
Sorry, I've lost your name.
Oh, sorry. My name's Sarah. I've worked with Councillor Rathbone and Councillor Gordon. We had a couple of meetings and a couple of emails just to confirm that Thames Water have paid the council £10,000. So this was a goodwill gesture with no connection to any other kind of compensation that's available to residents. So this was a goodwill gesture for the 2018 flood in Leabridge. And I believe with some of the consultation that Councillor Rathbone has undertaken, the proposition is to the Commission is that the £10,000 is split equally between Hackney Food Bank and also a local play group who are in the ward of Leabridge. And so really we are asking for the Commission to agree that that is how the grant shall be dispersed, and that we also propose that the grants are given unrestricted. A lot of organisations and charitable organisations at this time are facing quite a fragile financial situation. So we propose that the grants are awarded unrestricted, and that they are £5,000 each to each organisation. So I don't know if Councillor Rathbone wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'd just be brief. And actually, for those who are really fascinated by such things to do with bureaucracy, when an organisation like Thames gives money to a council, it's actually quite difficult to actually sort it out, wasn't it, Sarah? How we've sorted it out, because it's kind of not a budget thing, and it's not actually within the usual range of ways that money comes into the council. So hopefully we've sort of shown a little way forward, should this situation ever arise again. Just to say about the play group, in fact, we were saying in a pre-meeting, it's the same situation as in N4, is that I didn't quite realise the playgroup said that actually they've lost a lot of money because the nursery was completely flooded out. So for about 9 months they were closed, and of course all the children went off elsewhere and didn't come back. So they're still kind of recovering, and they haven't really properly received compensation. I just wanted to say that because it's also businesses that also suffer when flooding happens. And I know that the local shop as well, they really haven't, it's never really been properly sorted out. So I'm hoping, so I was going to ask the question earlier on, but it just never arose, that Thames Water will remember to sort out completely, as they did say in their presentation, when a business is actually having a problem, you know, with flooding and the loss of custom. That's very difficult, but you can show it through your previous takings and budgets and so on as to what it might have been in the last 2 or 3 years if you've been around that long.
Yeah, we completely agree with you, Councillor Rathbone, and I think that's something the Commission can take up, and we can write to Thames on behalf of the playgroup and the local shop that lost business and didn't get, obviously it takes a while to get that custom back, and also COVID. It's certainly something we heard from Steve, that they were willing to take up cases, so it's something certainly we can take up offline and with the support of the Commission, because and I think it's very generous to the local residents to donate that money to the Hackney Food Bank, because we do know how much pressure local people have been on, across the borough regarding the lack of food during this recent time. So I think that's very generous for the local residents. And we wish the playgroup nursery well, and maybe when this is over, we can all go and visit it and see how they're getting on. Hopefully they survive COVID. It'd be a nice outing for the Commission to go and see the nursery. Thank you very much. We are running behind time. Can I move on to the minutes, please? Can we agree the minutes? There was an update, wasn't there? Sorry, from Peabody, who said that whether their staff were on furlough or not, and it said, I think the update was one member of staff was on furlough, but the manager wasn't on furlough, who should have replied to the council, wording to make sure that it goes. Oh, that's right. The head of Neighbourhood East Region from Peabody said that he wasn't on furlough, but the staff were. So we can get the correct form of for the minutes. The next item we have is our work discussion about what we're going to do for the rest of our meetings. We had some discussions about. We've had meetings with various cabinet members and officers, and some of the ideas that have come forward are, including the residents liaison group, is doing some work around the council's relationship with its leaseholders. Also, work an update from Hackney Carnival. And Councillor LiH, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, and I have declared an interest. It might be that we talk about this outside of this meeting, but I think there is a need to look at the regeneration programme, in particular the process of supporting people who become leaseholders through the shared ownership scheme. because I'm managing quite a lot. Well, I'm not, because I'm not allowed to, because it's like a conflict of interest, but there's a considerable amount of yes, I think it's something that would be worth looking at. I think it's been discussed before, hasn't it? Because it's quite a huge capital piece of money that is put into this scheme, and I think it would be worth us maybe getting some experiences from some of the people that have gone through this process.
There's also, there's also the whole council relationship with its leaseholders. Which
Leaseholders, absolutely, and it's a different type of leaseholder, isn't it, as well, Sharon? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, certainly a different type from myself and other members. Yeah, something we can take into consideration. The other thing that's been, Councillor Burke has brought to our attention is to look at our green spaces and our play areas and see whether they're fit for the 21st century. We've had a lot of new people perhaps using our service parks and play areas this year, and whether they're sustainable and what we need to do to make sure that they carry on being the best that they can. That's one of the ideas. So what I'll do is I'll work with Tracy to put together some ideas and we'll bring them to the next commission meeting, if that's okay with everybody. Councillor Rathbone.
Yeah,
sorry, Councillor LiH.
Just to say, because I'm also chair of the Parks Forum as well, an august body, I think one of the things that we discussed in the Parks Forum recently was to do with, actually, people don't realise that there's a lot of green spaces around the borough, and I would like us to look at how some of these green spaces are being used. And there's one or two controversial areas. A place, I've forgotten the name of it for the minute, but an area, a small piece of land in Hackney Road, for instance, which some people want to keep as an open space, but there's also ideas about using it as a small market area and other things. So, and the conflict, as it were, between those people who want to park, and particularly true of some of our parks, just want to park, with an open space, and those, of course, that want training things, the gym trail and things like that. So I think there's plenty to discuss there, actually. But I would want us to make sure we don't just look at the main parks, but also the other spaces and how we use them.
Yep, that's certainly what Councillor Burke wants us to look at, is look at all our green areas and how we can increase our green areas as well. And I'm very keen, as a great user of our parks, especially the park that straddles both Money or Waldmill Fields Park, which is such a wonderful park.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're going to look at leaseholders. We've been asked to have a quick look at the carnival. We don't need a whole meeting at that. Obviously, it didn't happen this year, but it happened online. So we need to look at what happened online, who attended online, how we can make that work in the future, and also check that the officers are getting on with the recommendations that we made last time about greater involvement of the community groups, tenants, and our youth. Because it seems quite restrictive about who takes part. Not many people know how to take part. So I will work with them, with Councillor Ette and Tracy Anderson, who's our support officer, and we will bring back a presentation to you about what we can do. Councillor LiH.
Sorry, I was just wondering, I don't know if it would come under us, but there does seem to be quite a lot of noise around the living streets and the road closures and things like that. And I do wonder whether or not we could at least get a bit of an update on what's happening with that at the moment, because I know it's causing quite a lot of distress for those that are being affected by it, but also it'd be really good to see what the benefits are, so that we can then maybe present to the public maybe a little bit more detail of why we're doing this, because I know that it's quite I don't know if any of the other members would agree, but whether or not does it come under this portfolio?
Yes, it can. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Yeah, we can look at that. I mean, it is all under emergency orders at the moment and being consulted on, but certainly it is something we can take on board, and I can talk to officers in that section of Councillor Burke and work out when the best time will be to take it. Councillor Burke has also asked us to look at the implementation of the new waste collection services, which will go live in April. So I suggest that we look at that perhaps early either next summer or autumn, after it's been implemented, after, say, it's got about 3 months or so in, so we can see how it's going and see what the teething problems are and perhaps make recommendations. We've looked at it, we've agreed it. I don't see any point in discussing it again before it actually happens.
Chair, could I just say I'm really glad that Councillor LiH has raised that issue, because it is obviously a very important issue, but I'm wondering if we shouldn't look more at the low traffic neighbourhood plan,
yes,
which is
yes.
coming, rather than
that's what I meant. Sorry,
that's
what I meant. That's what I meant.
Yes.
You get my words muddled up.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I mean, it's still being formulated, but we are already seeing it, as it were, being happening. So
yes.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the other thing is, obviously, the council will be consulting on how it allocates its own properties, its own council properties, and changing the allocations process. So I do think that's something perhaps we need to look at when the work has perhaps developed on it a bit more, perhaps early after Christmas, sometime in January or February. So we'll put all that together, and we'll get back to you on that. And I declare the meeting closed at 2 minutes late. So thank you, Councillor LiH, for the extra 2 minutes.
Councillor LiH has
Well
stayed
done.
2 extra minutes. Yeah.